Okay, so this is going to be a video going over why you should load your hinge pattern and why it's beneficial for your training. So if you haven't seen our previous video where our coach Jamie goes over the basics of a hinge pattern and then how to progress it a little bit, I would advise going and watching that first. Then come back to me and we will look at how to load that pattern. First off, we're just going to touch on why it is beneficial for you to be loading the hinge pattern. So basically your posterior chain, so your hamstrings, your glutes and your back, it's all really important in any kind of sport setting or day-to-day life as well. You use that hinge pattern probably more than you would think in your day-to-day life, and also in any sports where you're bending, causing any kind of bending through your back or your hips. That is going to be, the hinge pattern is going to help you do that in a more efficient way. Another reason that it can be really beneficial is if you're coming back from an injury of some kind. It can be to do with your knees, can do with your hips, back injuries, things like that. Learning how to hinge properly and more efficiently can really help you, one, in the sport setting, getting you stronger, getting you back to where you want to be in the sport you're in, and also just in day-to-day life, and you won't feel that kind of chronic pain that you might feel that's stopping you and holding you back from training the way you want to be training. So in this video, we're just going to show you basically how you can load the hinge pattern, challenge yourself a little bit further, using 1 load, 2 weight position, and 3 using single leg and double leg movements to challenge you fully. So one of the ways that we can load your hinge pattern is going to be through an RDL or a stiff leg deadlift. Now you can either use a barbell like I'm doing in this video, or you can use a dumbbell in either hand, or you can use a kettlebell. All of the principles are kind of the same, it's obviously just different equipment that you're using. So for the technique of this exercise, I'm going to use the barbell, and you want a fairly narrow grip. So you don't want to be too wide, pretty much just the outside of your legs. Pick the bar up and step away from anything that is going to get in your way. With your foot position, it's just like your usual hinge pattern, so you want to be feet directly underneath your hips, slight bend in the knee, and then from here, you want to push your hips to the back of the wall. Okay, so that's your hinge pattern, like this. Just like you would doing it with the band or with your elevated kettlebell deadlift. Now, there's 4 kind of technique points that I want you to focus on when you do this. First thing is going to be slightly soft knees. You don't want to lock your knees out and keep them straight, because that usually just means that you're going to be loading your back. And that's not what we're wanting to do. Second thing, keeping that neutral ribcage and pelvis position. So if I don't keep a neutral ribcage and pelvis position, what you'll usually see is some rounding through your back. So like this, pulling down, which is all pulling through my back, or the opposite way, which is arching really far and your bum is sticking out an awful lot, which again puts it through my back. Okay, so that's the second thing I want you to focus on. Third thing, pushing those hips to the back of the room. Okay, so make sure you're getting that hinge pattern of pushing the hips backwards to load your glutes and hamstrings. So for example, when you're loading, what you want to do is basically track the bar or the dumbbells or the kettlebell down the front of your legs. Okay, so keep that bar nice and close to your legs the whole time you do the hinge pattern. So if I was to keep it far out, it's basically going to put a lot of tension through my upper back, and to hold that is pretty hard on my arms. So keep that in, use the lats to lock that down, and it'll stop any back muscles from taking over. Okay. So another exercise I'm going to show you guys that you can use to load this hinge pattern is going to be a good morning. Now again, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to face out the way from the rack, but I would suggest probably turning around and facing in the way when you guys do this yourself, just because it's easier to see where you're going to rack onto with the safety bar, and then you're not gonna hurt yourself or anything. Don't come at me. Okay, so for the good morning, you want your bar to be on your back. Hold your hands just at a comfortable position. You can go a little bit wider if that's comfortable, or narrower, whatever works for you. Now, the most important thing with this exercise is going to be keeping ribcage and pelvis position, okay? So making sure, just like in your RDL, that you're not going to bend or flex through your back at all. So feel your core engage, and then just like in your hinge pattern, like I've spoken about before, you want to push those hips right back to the back of the room, load your glutes and hamstrings, and then push back up. Okay, do another one, and then back up. So what you'll probably notice with the good mornings is that it requires a little bit more core strength and stability. If you're not getting that hinge pattern of pushing the hips back, the weight's going to be really far forward, and again it's going to pull right into your lower back. So make sure that you're getting that hinge pattern before you load it in this way. So one thing to note when you're doing this is that your weight wants to be primarily in your heels. So you still want to feel your toes in contact with the floor, but as you're going back, I'll just show you, as you're going back, you want to be pushing back into your heels. Okay, so notice that I'm not going to be going forward with my weight and then going into it. I'm going to be pushing I'm going to be pushing the weight back into my heels, and that'll make it easier for me to get those hamstrings and glutes engaging. If you find that your weight is forward on your toes, what you'll probably notice will happen is that you will feel the weight pulling you right forward. You're not going to get that hinge pattern, so your hips are going to kind of stay where you are, and it's going to be your back that controls where the weight goes, and that is going to strain your lower back and cause you probably a little bit of discomfort. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a single leg variation of the hinge pattern. So this is going to be like a single leg RDL. So basically what we did through there, just on one leg and loaded slightly differently. So first thing I'm going to get us to use is a dumbbell here. You want to grab the dumbbell and hold it in the opposite hand to the leg that you're going to be standing on and doing the exercise on. So same things as before, think about ribcage pelvis position, and then when you're doing this, pushing the hips back as much as you can. Obviously the range is going to be a little bit different with how far you can push your hips back because your weight is on one leg, but just try and keep loading the hamstring and the glute and keep the weight back. Okay, so from here what you want to think about is keeping everything nice and engaged and square. Keep the lat engaged on the hand you're holding the dumbbell on, and then just hinge, moving through the hips down as far as you can go, and then squeeze back up, and again, and back up. Okay, so from another angle, you'll see that as this. This way now. And another angle. Okay, so notice how with that I'm doing the same kind of things as I was doing next door. So I was keeping the weight close to my leg. I wasn't holding the weight too far forward. And I was also keeping my weight in the back of my foot, so more in my heel and pushing backwards. Okay, so another way we can load that same movement, so the single leg RDL, is by using a cable machine. So setting up your cable machine, you basically want to have it from a fairly low angle and get a handle that you can grip onto. Same thing as holding it in the opposite hand to the leg you're going to be working on. I'm going to do it on this leg. Now from there, this is basically going to want to pull you forward and twist you around a little bit. So we really need to make sure that lat is engaging to pull the weight back. Okay, then from there, onto the one leg, keep it nice and steady through the core, and then you're doing that hinge pattern as well, and up. So this is quite good if you want a little bit of a counterbalance, so it kind of helps you stabilize a little bit better, as long as you can keep that arm back, keep the lat engaged, and then load the hamstring and glute as you do it. Okay, so hopefully that showed you how to load your hinge pattern and how you can use that in your next training session and strengthen your posterior chain to help you in your training and in your sport setting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to our channel to see more content like this, and give us a follow on our social media as well. Thank you.